Have you ever considered that perhaps the deepest danger doesn't lie in weapons, wars, or machines, but in ideas? Because ideas, when they are alive, have the power to destroy worlds. And no idea was more incendiary, more radical, more transformative than the one born in the mind of Friedrich Nietzsche. He did not wield swords. He did not command armies. But his words crossed time like dynamite buried in the heart of civilization. Nietzsche was the man who dared to think the unthinkable, to challenge what no one else dared to touch, and to say what no age had the courage to hear, that everything we call truth may be only a construction, and all morality, a mask. That's why many called him dangerous. Because Nietzsche's danger doesn't lie in what he destroys, but in what he awakens. He wanted neither followers, nor the faithful, nor disciples. He wanted free spirits, men and women capable of walking without crutches, thinking without dogmas, loving without guarantees. And that is the real danger. A human being who doesn't need imposed truths to live. A being who creates their own meaning, even when everything seems to collapse. Nietzsche is the philosopher of the abyss. The one who looked into nothingness and, instead of falling, learned to dance. But what makes his philosophy so dangerous is not nihilism, not negation, not God is dead. It's what comes after. The danger is in what he offers in place of the sacred that collapses. Because, when he announces the death of God, he doesn't celebrate a destruction. He inaugurates a revolution. The revolution of human consciousness. He hands us the burden and the glory of being creators. The burden of no longer having a manual. And the glory of being able to write our own story. And few can bear that freedom. Nietzsche is dangerous because he says, there is no longer a heaven to guide you. Now you must learn to walk on the fire of your own existence. He rips every certainty from us, and, in their place, leaves a mirror. And that mirror is brutal, because it reflects what we most fear to see. Ourselves. Modern man, accustomed to being guided, protected, forgiven, finds himself, for the first time, alone before the infinite. Without God, without destiny, without eternal truths. Only himself and the chaos. But Nietzsche whispers, chaos is only the beginning. The most dangerous philosophy in history is the one that promises no paradises. It does not console, it awakens. It does not save, it confronts. It does not protect, it frees. Nietzsche believed that true awakening happens when a person stops seeking salvation and begins to seek creation. When they stop asking, what is the meaning of life? And begin to ask, what meaning can I create? This shift seems simple, but it is the deepest earthquake ever to shake human thought, because it destroys the foundation of all faith, all morality, all politics, every system that depends on a ready-made meaning. Nietzsche, the prophet of fire, lit the torch and said, now the world is in your hands. But when humanity took hold of that torch, it saw that it burns. And that is why they called Nietzsche mad. Because he endured what almost no one can endure. Lucidity. Lucidity is dangerous. Because to see the world as it is, without veils, without illusions, without guarantees, is to lose consolation but gain freedom. Nietzsche looked at reality as one who stares at the sun, and the light was too strong. But even blinded, he kept pointing to the horizon, shouting to all of us, you can do more than you believe. You were born to create. Nietzsche's philosophy is dangerous because it pulls humanity out of spiritual childhood. It drags us from the comfort zone of beliefs and throws us into the desert of responsibility. Responsibility for ourselves, for our lives, for our destinies. And that desert is vast, but it is also the cradle of freedom. Nietzsche said that humanity lives asleep, dreaming of paradises and rewards, with good and evil defined by others. But awakening is inevitable. Sooner or later, every soul must open its eyes and realize. No one is going to save you. Because there is nothing to be saved from. There is only life to be lived. And to live, for Nietzsche, is to create. To create oneself. To reinvent oneself. To say yes to what is, even to the tragic, the ugly, the inevitable. That is why he said, "Life is tragic, and that is why it is beautiful." The most dangerous philosophy in history is the one that teaches humans to love destiny. To love what is. To refuse to ask the world to be different. And instead to transform the world with one's own being. Nietzsche called this amor fati, love of fate. And few concepts have been so liberating, and so frightening. Because to love fate is to love even what hurts. What wounds, what destroys us. It is to look at suffering and say, "You too are part of my work." To love fate is the opposite of fleeing from life. It is to embrace it in its totality. It is to say yes to chaos and make it into art. It is to dance even when the ground gives way. Nietzsche believed that a person is only truly free when they learn to love what is inevitable. And that is the most dangerous idea human thought has ever produced. Because whoever loves the inevitable can no longer be controlled. Lucidity is a fire. And like any fire, it illuminates, but it also destroys. Friedrich Nietzsche was the one who dared to light that fire within himself. And in doing so, he saw what few can bear to see. That the world we call real is upheld by carefully constructed illusions. He realized that the truths we defend so fervently, morality, faith, reason, progress, are fragile scaffolds propping a facade over the abyss, and that the abyss is within us. Nietzsche did not want to destroy the world. He wanted to unmask it. He wanted us to see how much of what we call truth is only fear in disguise. Humans fear chaos, and so they invent meaning. They tremble before pain, and so they create faith. They feel weak, and so they call their weakness a virtue. Nietzsche perceived the most uncomfortable thing in the human condition, that everything which consoles us also imprisons us. That every belief is a form of escape, and every certainty an anesthetic. But he did not condemn humanity for this. He understood. He knew that we need veils to avoid going mad, because naked truth is unbearable. And even so, Nietzsche wanted to touch it. He walked to the limits of consciousness, to the point where words dissolve and thought becomes fever. And there, on the threshold between lucidity and collapse, he grasped something terrible and divine. That there is no meaning of life waiting to be discovered. There is only life. And it needs no justification. This is the most dangerous idea a human being can have. Because when meaning disappears, all structures tremble. God's throne falls. Morality unravels. Duty dissolves. And a person, naked before infinity, must decide whether they still wish to live. Nietzsche chose to live. Even without guarantees. Even without meaning. Even without heaven. And that choice is what makes him dangerous. For him, lucidity was not a rational achievement. It was a state of courage. Courage to face chaos without averting one's gaze. Courage to say yes to the tragic. Courage to keep loving life, even when it seems to have no reason at all. Nietzsche believed that the truly awakened person is not the one who finds truth, but the one who creates their own gaze upon it. Because every truth, deep down, is interpretation, and every interpretation is an act of power. He wrote, "There are no facts, only interpretations." And with that sentence, he dismantled the entire structure of Western civilization. Because if there are no absolute facts, then there are no divine laws, no eternal morality, no immutable dogmas. Everything is fluid, alive, creative. Everything depends on the gaze. and that is terrifying. Because if everything is interpretation, then responsibility is ours. We can no longer blame the gods, nor destiny, nor society. Everything that exists in the human world is the fruit of human will. Nietzsche called this creative force the will to power. Not the power to dominate others, but the power to affirm life. The power to say yes to existence, even without guarantees. The will that moves the sun, the river, art, and thought. This will is the breath of the universe. But modern humanity forgot it. Because we preferred security to greatness. We preferred obedience to creation. Nietzsche said that civilization built a morality of servitude, a morality that calls instinct a sin, and strength an evil. But what would the world be without the instinct to create, to desire, to break through? For Nietzsche, the true sin is not pride. It is cowardice. Cowardice to be who one is. Cowardice to think for oneself. Cowardice to love one's own power. The most dangerous philosophy in history is the one that pulls us from submission. That says, there are no commandments, only choices. And that is too much for many. Because living without commandments is living without ground. But Nietzsche whispers, yes, it's without ground that one learns to fly. The danger of lucidity is that it forces you to be free. And freedom is the most beautiful and most terrible weight there is. Lucidity tears through every illusion. It shows you that the world is neither good nor evil. It is only real. And it is up to you to decide what to do with that real. Nietzsche believed that the lucid person is the supreme artist. For they turn the inevitable into a work. They turn suffering into wisdom. They turn chaos into form. They turn existence itself into art. And here is the secret. Nietzsche's philosophy isn't destruction, it's creation. But to create, you must destroy the old world within yourself. That is why it is dangerous. Because it forces you to die before you are reborn. It demands your own transfiguration. Nietzsche didn't want humanity to be good. He wanted it to be authentic. He wanted it whole, alive, passionate, tragic. To live with the intensity of gods and the fragility of mortals. And this fusion, of the divine and the human, is the true awakening. Lucidity, he said, is a kind of intoxication. An intoxication of the soul that understands everything is ephemeral, and still celebrates. Nietzsche called this the Dionysian spirit. The force that laughs, dances, and creates in the midst of chaos. The Dionysian spirit does not flee from pain. It turns it into music. It dances over the abyss. And that is why Nietzsche loved it. Because it represents the free soul. The one that says yes to life even among ruins. Lucidity is dangerous because it makes you see that meaning is not given. It is created at every instant. And creation is the most divine gesture there is. To be free. Few words are as frightening as that. Because freedom, contrary to what people think, does not free, you pay for it. It demands from us something we spend our lives trying to avoid, responsibility. Nietzsche's philosophy is dangerous because it offers no salvation. It rips the veil, breaks the altars, destroys the manuals, and then leaves you in front of the mirror. There, without masks, without dogmas, without excuses. You must answer the question humanity has postponed for millennia. Who am I? When no one else tells me who I must be. Nietzsche believed that every form of authority, religious, moral, political, is simply an attempt to flee from that question. Because it is easier to follow than to create. It is easier to kneel than to affirm. It is easier to repeat a truth than to endure the silence where no truth exists. But the free person is the one who faces the silence, who hears the sound of their own thought echoing in the void, and does not flee. They know that the solitude of consciousness is the price of authenticity, and that the path of freedom is narrow, arduous, full of falls. But it is also the only path that leads to greatness. Nietzsche said, "Man is something that must be overcome. To overcome man is not to eliminate the human. It is to elevate it. To awaken the creator who stands behind the follower. To free the spirit from the prison of obedience. To transform existence into a work of art." Humanity spent centuries seeking a God to guide it. But Nietzsche declared, "God is dead." And with that sentence, he did not kill the divine. He freed it from human hands. Because the true divine, he said, was never outside. It was always within. In the creative impulse, in the force that turns pain into music, fall into wisdom, chaos into beauty. But in forgetting this, humanity knelt. It invented commandments, judgments, punishments, all to avoid confronting its own power. Nietzsche looked at this kneeling humanity and said, "Stand up. You are gods and you have forgotten it." And that is the real scandal of his philosophy. It does not offend faith, it offends fear. Because the frightened person needs a shepherd. But the awakened person walks on their own feet. To be free is to live without guarantees. It is to know the universe promises nothing, and still say, yes. It is to accept the tragic and transform it into dance. It is to love destiny as it is. Nietzsche called this amor fati, love of fate. Loving fate is not resignation. It is to understand that every pain is part of life's music. It is to look at the inevitable and say, I choose it. It is to embrace chance as one embraces one's own heart. To love fate is the supreme gesture of freedom. Because those who love fate no longer need promises. They do not need paradise. They do not need salvation. They are enough. They are whole. Nietzsche said, I want to learn more and more to see as beautiful what is necessary in things. This sentence is a hymn to lucidity. An invitation to love not only pleasure, but also pain. Not only light, but also shadow. Because the wholeness of life includes everything we try to avoid. The most dangerous philosophy in history is the one that teaches you to love what is. Because once you learn to love what is, nothing can control you anymore. Neither guilt, nor religion, nor morality. Because everything loses its power over the one who has made peace with their own destiny. The person who dares to be free does not seek the good. They seek truth. And truth, in Nietzsche, is never sweet. It is raw, rough, alive. It cuts, but it also awakens. It destroys the false, so the real can bloom. Nietzsche believed the human spirit is a battlefield. Between the will to live and the fear of suffering. Between the courage to create and the desire to hide. And victory, he said, lies with the one who accepts suffering as part of the game. What does not kill me makes me stronger. These words are not consolation, they are a law of life. Because life is made of pain and overcoming. Fall and rebirth. The one who avoids pain avoids growth. But the one who faces it, awakens. Nietzsche wanted to form a humanity of awakened ones. Men and women who would not be led by dogma, but by an inner force, silent, wild, creative. A humanity capable of laughing at the absurd, of turning chaos into art, and of loving the world in spite of everything. He believed that one day this new kind of human would arise. The Overman, Übermensch. Not a superior being, but a whole being. A being who creates values instead of repeating them. Who does not live from guilt, but from creation. Who does not flee the earth, but celebrates it. Who turns the tragic into beauty, and suffering into wisdom. Nietzsche said the Overman is the true successor of God. Because when a person awakens to their own power, the divine does not die, it is reborn within them. And this is the mystery. God dies, so that humanity may learn to create. That is why his philosophy is dangerous. Because it gives humans the power of the gods, and their burden as well. Because creating one's own meaning is the greatest of burdens. But it is also the highest form of freedom. To be free, for Nietzsche, is to no longer need to be saved. It is to understand that salvation is only another name for fear. And that love, true love, is not an escape from pain, but a communion with it. The free person does not wait for paradise. They build it, here, now, with what they have, with what they are. They do not flee tragedy, they turn it into poetry. They do not flee death, they include it as part of the dance. Nietzsche said, "Without music, life would be a mistake." And that is what his philosophy is, a dangerous music. A melody made of chaos and beauty, of despair and laughter, of fall and ascent. It is the music of the human being trying to be more than human. Nietzsche taught us that life doesn't need meaning. It needs intensity. And that the greatest mistake of humanity is to confuse living with merely surviving. Most people live in fear. Fear of erring, of losing, of dying. But the free person lives with courage, the courage to be. The one who dares to be free does not fear the end, because they have already been reborn 1,000 times within themselves. They know that each pain is only the prelude to a new form of being, and that the true miracle is not eternity. It is the capacity to recreate oneself. Nietzsche's philosophy is dangerous because it does not offer you shelter. It offers you wings. And flying is always risky. But it is also the only way to touch the infinite. All freedom has a price. And the price of Nietzsche's freedom was far too high. Because the more he freed thought, the more he lost the ground. Each toppled truth left a void. And that void grew, like an echo inside the soul. He destroyed the gods, but put nothing in their place. And in the middle of that desert, he realized, the one who kills God must learn to live without him. But who is prepared for that? Who can bear the weight of their own consciousness when there is no one left to blame? No one to obey? No one to forgive? Nietzsche dared to walk to the very end of that road. The road where every certainty dies. And there, he met what he called the abyss. Whoever fights with monsters should take care not to become a monster. And if you gaze long into the abyss also gazes into you. He looked, and the abyss answered. Nietzsche's mind was like a volcano, incandescent, incessant, insomniac. He wrote as one who bleeds. Each word was an open wound. Each idea, a lightning bolt cleaving his own heart. His body could take no more. Pain consumed him, solitude corroded him. He was misunderstood, ridiculed, forgotten. But he kept writing. Because writing, for him, was not a craft. It was an exorcism. Nietzsche said that thinking is dangerous. And he proved it with his life. To think to the limit is like staring straight into the sun. The light is so strong it blinds. And that is what happened. Lucidity turned to fever. Fever to delirium. Delirium to silence. Turin, 1889. A man walks along snow-covered streets. The cold is intense, the body shivers, the mind throbs. Suddenly, he sees a horse being whipped. The animal screams. Nietzsche runs to it, embraces it, and weeps. He weeps as if for all humanity. For all the world's pain. For all dead gods and all lost men. There, in the middle of the square, the man who freed thought is overcome by his own heart. His mind breaks, and the silence begins. Nietzsche would never be the same. 11 years of darkness awaited him. 11 years of silence and shadow. Philosophy had consumed him, because he did not just think his ideas. He lived them. And to live the truth, to the end, is costly. But there is a secret beauty in this collapse. Nietzsche was not destroyed by madness. He was consumed by the intensity of his own lucidity. He did not lose his mind. He transcended the limit of what we call reason. What others call collapse may have been revelation, because there is a point where thought touches the infinite. and the body, too small, cannot keep up. The mind opens, and everything rushes in, the world, the chaos, the pain, the divine. And no one returns the same from such a crossing. Nietzsche crossed. And on the other side, he found silence. His sister cared for him, the world forgot him. But his echo kept growing. Every word of his, every book, every aphorism, became a seed planted in the unconscious of humanity. And those seeds sprouted. Philosophers, artists, psychologists, scientists, all drank from the fire he had lit. Heidegger, Jung, Freud, Sartre, Foucault, Camus, all walked upon the ruins Nietzsche left, trying to rebuild the meaning he had destroyed. But perhaps Nietzsche did not destroy meaning. Perhaps he showed that meaning was never outside. That the greatest act of faith is to keep creating, even knowing that everything is transient, even knowing that nothing is certain, even knowing that, in the end, silence prevails. The price of freedom is solitude, and Nietzsche paid that price to the end. But what he gained in return was immortality, because true freedom is not to survive, it is to burn. It is to let life pass through you like lightning, and then keep dancing among the ashes. Nietzsche burned, but his fire still illuminates us, because there is something sacred in the soul that chooses thought. Even when thought hurts, there is something divine in the one who prefers truth, even when it destroys them, and that is why Nietzsche never died. He is present in every person who dares to doubt, in every artist who turns pain into beauty, in every thinker who prefers the solitude of lucidity to the comfort of a lie. Nietzsche is the symbol of the human mind at its limit, the poet of the abyss, the prophet of overcoming, the man who proved that madness is only the name we give to freedom when it becomes too great. And that is why his philosophy is, and always will be, the most dangerous in history, because it looks you in the eye and says, you don't need anyone to save you. You are the creator. You are the meaning. You are the fire. When silence took Nietzsche, many thought everything had ended. But silence is not the end, it is the interval between two worlds. His mind fell quiet, but the thought kept breathing. And with time, it grew stronger than ever. What Nietzsche left behind was neither a system nor a doctrine. He left a flame, and that flame passed from mind to mind, from generation to generation, like a fire that cannot be contained. The man who died without followers created, unintentionally, an army of awakened consciences. Not disciples, but free spirits. Men and women who understood that thinking is the most courageous act there is, that living is to philosophize with the body, and that creating is the most divine gesture a human can perform. Nietzsche is the philosopher who taught us to love chaos. Not the chaos of destruction, but the chaos of creation. The chaos that exists before every birth. The chaos that prepares the ground for the new. He said, one must still have chaos within oneself to give birth to a dancing star. Chaos, to him, was not an enemy, it was a mother. And whoever flees chaos, flees their own evolution. We were taught to fear uncertainty, to seek guarantees, to believe that goodness is stability and doubt is weakness. But Nietzsche shows us the opposite. Doubt is the origin of strength. It is at the moment when everything seems to collapse that consciousness awakens. He knew that life was not made to be endured, it was made to be affirmed. And to affirm life is not to accept it passively, but to create with it, to dance with destiny, to embrace even suffering as part of the dance. This is the most dangerous philosophy in history, the philosophy that invites humanity to be its own God. Not a God of temples and commandments, but a God who creates worlds within. Nietzsche did not wish to destroy the sacred. He wished to return it to the human. He said that God is dead, not as provocation, but as liberation. Because when a person realizes that the divine has died outside, they finally discover the divine that has always lived within. What dies is dogma.